Now that interest rates are increasing and the fear for a recession is growing, 911 turbo values are flattening. Yes, we saw values soar for the last few years, but spring season already revealed that the trend was running out of breath. However, there are two models in the turbo market to which this doesn't apply and still saw large value increases during the last quarter. In this video you'll find out which models those are and what happened in the 911 turbo market during the last quarter. But as always, we'll first have a look at the current US market. Over here we have the turbo market of June split by the different generations. There are 668 cars for sale and the median price is $180,000. However, this price does not mean so much as there are large differences between the generations. The newer the generation, the higher the price. A 996.2 is the cheapest and will cost you around $80,000, yet prices stretch up to $140,000 for the manuals. A 997.1 on average is not a lot more expensive as they go for $90,000, whereas the premium for a 997.2 is substantial. They will set you back around $125,000. Yet, things get quickly more expensive from that point onwards. A 991.1 costs around $148,000, but a .2 demands a premium of $42,000. 992 prices are completely on their own, with almost no overlap to other generations. They have a median price of $300,000. So we are now up to date on today's market, and that means that it's time to have a look at the value development over time. As I already mentioned, most prices are now flattening after a long period of enormous increases. The time of double-digit growth seems to be behind us, that is, for most of the market. There are two exceptions. Let's have a look at the value development. Over here we can see the 2-year median price change for the 996, 997, 991 and 992, and they show a lot of similarity. Between the summer of 2020 and December 2021, prices increased for all models. 996s increased by 26%, 997s by 31% and 991s by 6%. Even 992 prices increased. However, prices are flat for most models since the beginning of this year. 991 prices went up by 1.6%, but this price change over here is not statistically confirmed, and this means that it could be the result of chance. Therefore, I think it's fair to say that prices were flat. 997 prices only changed by $5, so also over here there is no change. Even in the much praised 992 market we can see that the price trend has been flat. The only market segment in this graph that saw a large price increase is the one for the 996. Prices are up by 22.6%, and this price increase is of course statistically confirmed, and this is remarkable to say the least. Usually these markets behave approximately in the same way, but clearly not here. So what happened? To find an answer to that question we need to dig deeper into the data. Moreover, I mentioned in the beginning of the video that there are two segments that saw price increases, but we can only see one of them over here. We also need to look deeper into the data to unravel the price increase in the second segment. We can of course look at this data in several ways. We can look at the automatic versus the manuals, the coupes versus the cabriolets, the S versus the normal turbos, you name it. But not all of these splits are relevant. I will therefore only show you the most interesting splits for each generation. Let's start with the 996 and work our way up to the 992. Over here we have the price development for the 996 market on a more readable scale, and this makes it easier to spot the 23% price increase during the last 6 months. So what happened here? Prices increased and they increased across the board. However, they are to some extent driven by a quality increase in the market. I mentioned it in a few other videos and I will do it again here. The 996 market starts to look like a collectible car market. Let me show you. Over here we have the market characteristics over time with the supply, median mileage and median model year development. And this reveals that the cars that are offered for sale right now have a much lower mileage than the cars that were for sale 3 months ago. Naturally, the lower the mileage of a car, the higher the price. So it's fair to assume that the cars that are for sale in today's market are, on average, in a better condition than the cars that were in the market 3 months ago. Yet, it's not the only reason that prices went up. During Q1 we saw a slight increase in the median mileage and prices still increased by 12%. So what else is happening in the 996 market? Supply is tightening. Look at the graph on the left. We can see that supply is trending down fiercely and that there are only 40 cars for sale, and this is 67 cars less than in July 2020. So both these developments, an increase in the general condition and a decrease in the supply, fit with the collectible car market. Moreover, prices increased slightly more for the low mileage examples, and also this, again, is something that you typically see in a collectible car market. And with that, it's time to move on to the 997 generation. This generation namely includes the second model that went up in price. But before we do that, if you like this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Looking at the 997 price trend, we can see again a large price increase since the summer of 2020, followed by a flat development during the first 2 quarters of this year. The price surge is clearly over. However, this only applies to the 997.1 market. If we split the trend between the .1s and the .2s, we can see that the .1s came down by 2.2% while the .2s increased by 10.6%. And this goes for both the base and the S model. The 997.2 is often named as the pinnacle of the 911, and this seems to be reflected in the prices. There are not many markets that saw such a large price increase during the first half of this year. So we saw now that the 996 and the 997.2 markets stand out from the rest. They are the only ones with significant price increases. However, that doesn't mean that nothing interesting is happening in the other market segments. Looking at the 991 market, we can see the by now familiar pattern. An increase followed by a flat development. However, no change is also an interesting observation. The 991 market is namely extremely stable, and all of the underlying models moved in sync with each other. You see, if we split the market by the .1 and the .2s and by the base, S and S exclusive models, we can see that the trends are very similar. They all follow this S-shaped pattern. However, the S is slightly stronger in the 991.2 S market. Prices came down in the last quarter, hereby pushing prices back to the exact same level as in March 2020. And I'm not sure if I analyzed any other cars on the channel where prices are at the same level as that they were 2 years ago. Yes, the median mileage increased a lot in the .2 market, but wouldn't you have expected something a bit more spectacular? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. We will move on now with the 992 market. Over here we can see the price trend for the used and certified used cars, and this reveals that prices have been flat during the last 2 quarters. Yet, prior to this they increased and they are then also still at elevated levels. It is unlikely that you will find a car at MSRP, let alone that you can get an allocation. Supply for new cars is very tight. A look on the supply graph shows that new supply levels hovered around 20 cars, and we all know the reasons for this. We have the chip shortages, the war in Ukraine, and the sinking of the Felicity cargo ship. Interestingly though, supply for used cars is steadily increasing. Yet, as you can see from the mileage graph, these cars only have a few thousand miles, so my best guess is that people are trying to get out of them without any loss or with a profit. After all, if you manage to get one at MSRP, it's likely that you can sell it for the same amount or even more. And who wouldn't like to drive around for free in a 992 Turbo? Now before we wrap up and conclude, there is still one more item to cover. I asked you guys and girls on Instagram what things you would like to know about the 911 Turbo market. This is something that I started to do before recording a video, so if you would like to see your questions featured, be sure to follow me on Instagram. It's at Fourwheel Trader. Most of you asked me if the market is coming down and if it is worth waiting for the market to come down. Now let me start by saying what I usually say to people who ask me this question. Buy first and foremost what you love and only look at the value development after that. Yet, this channel is about car values, so let's address the issue at hand. Last year was a record-breaking year for price increases, but now we can see that they are flattening in most markets. So looking at the historical trend, it makes sense that prices will be stable for a moment and not continue with the same increase rate. Also looking ahead, I think that things are a bit gloomy. Inflation is high, interest rates and recession fears are increasing and stocks are down. And those things are loosely correlated to the performance of the car market. So taking the history into account and the current economic climate, I think it's more likely that we will see a flat price development or a slight price decrease than that we will see a further price increase. But is it worth to wait for a price decrease? I sometimes receive comments stating that I'm implying all the time that prices are topping, but this is not true. I've been reporting to you on these topping patterns for the last 6 months or so, and that is because that's when they started to appear in the data. Yet, prices are moving slowly, so the message remains relevant. Moreover, since more and more markets are topping, the confidence that we can have in this topping pattern can increase. So if you are a person who worries a lot about values, it might be worthwhile to wait a moment and see if prices are coming down. I think that there is a downside risk to the 911 Turbo market, but I don't expect that prices will suddenly come down with double digits. However, if a price drop of a few percentages doesn't bother you, you might as well go for it. And with that, let's have a quick look at the question from Knockers. He asked how the price trends compare to the one for the 911 GT3. Now one can make a lot of comparisons between those markets, and I'm not fully sure what comparison you're interested in. I therefore recommend that you check out the latest GT3 market update by clicking over here. And on that note, we will wrap up and conclude. The days of double-digit price increases are behind us, as the majority of the segments show a flat price trend, and this is also what we can see in other markets. However, there are a few exceptions to this. We saw that 9 and 6 prices still increased by 12%, and that this market starts to look a lot like a collectible car market. Also 9 and 7.2 prices increased, and it hereby might live up to its reputation of being one of the best 911s ever. And with that we arrive at the end of this video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but are not yet ready to step up to a turbo, have a look at my channel, as you will find market analysis for a large variety of cars over there. You will find, for example, a market analysis for a 911 Carrera. You can, by the way, also comment the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.